Good afternoon, House Transportation Committee on, what is it? Today's Thursday already, March 10th, 11th, 12th. Look at that, Thursday the 12th. We are working on, or going to look at some work that has been done with Representative Pouch and Rep. Ben with our Ledge Council. We've taken quite a bit of testimony. Agents of Ag was in. We heard from ACCD. We've heard from another people. We had quite a presentation, as I recall, on sort of electric charging and issues, and that had prompted some significant extra work by some of the committee members. And so I'm going to throw it to Representative Pouch that sort of got us where we're here for this, and then we're going to hear what he's been working on with Logan. And then, given the constraints that we've learned about, we'll figure out how we're going to move forward or not from there. But I want to at least make sure we get fairness to the committee.
Sure. So the concepts are, I think, have been adjusted based on some of the testimony we have. In particular, the testimony on charging of sort of the Wild Wild West. And I think we had in our bill, our alternative transportation bill, the idea that public chargers need to take credit cards. And that's been floating around here in the State House for at least 3 years, that, hey, let's make sure public chargers do that. Well, come to find out, we found in our existing laws the requirement for public chargers, public equipment like this, to take multiple forms of payment. So there's a couple pieces here. One is the fact that there's a whole mix of laws that already exist that control electric charging equipment, public ones in particular. And we're just all sort of learning that. So the second half of this is really put together a working group that looks at what are all the regulations that already exist that impact charging. And so that's the second half. And then the first half is what perhaps could be one of the biggest pieces to support public charging in Vermont, and that is to put the real-time status of public chargers available, so people can see where they are, how much they cost, and for the most part, most do this, but not necessarily all. The NEVI chargers from the federal government, they have this built into their requirements. So there's a realization that public chargers that are available to the public need to be have visibility. And there is data that shows having that visibility for everybody in an easy way to see it will increase uptake of electric vehicles, which is the goal of our state to meet our climate change. So that sort of is where these two pieces are coming from. And I'll turn it over to Damien, I guess, to read the language and explain what it says.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Damien Leonard from the Office of Legislative Counsel. Pull up the, I'm sure I got the right document here. So the language here, what it does is it takes our existing, in Title 19, we have a chapter at the end of the title that deals with a variety of electric vehicle related sort of miscellaneous EV sections. So it adds definitions of what a charging network provider is. This would be the person, which could be a corporate entity, an individual, et cetera, that operates the digital communication network that remotely manages the chargers and is responsible for operating and maintaining them, supporting the equipment and other facilities. And it includes networks that delegate or contract with other people to do portions of that work. Charging stations are what you would think of. It is the group of actual chargers that is available to the public. Charging station operator could be different than the charging network. So this could be, for example, The chargers outside the building here are on the charge point network, but the operator is the state. BGS controls those chargers. So that's really the difference here. Connector is that is the plug that goes from the charger to the electric vehicle. Direct current fast charger is what it says it is. It's a charger that enables rapid charging through the delivery of DC current as opposed to alternating current. So that's what we would also call level 3 fast charger. And then the other changes to that section until you get to level 2 charger, just renumbering. Level 2 charger are single phase AC chargers that with a maximum output less than or equal to 80 amps. So that works out to about, I think, 15 kilowatts, if my math is right. But that's a very fast level 2 charger. Many of them are, closer to 40 to 60 amps. NEVI standards it's the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Standards, and they have a variety of sort of standard requirements, including for connection to the network. The new definition of port is, so what you'll see on some chargers is, if you think of a standard charger, it may have a cord coming out of each side, which would be 2 ports. Sometimes you will see 2 cords coming out of each side to fit, or even 3, where it'll fit different standards for the high-speed plug. And so port is just the side that you can plug into regardless of which of the connectors you use. That brings us to the substance here, which would essentially require that a network provider or operator of a charging station would make available to third-party software developers free of charge data necessary to provide real-time information on availability, power delivery rating, and price of each charging station. So there's sort of the basic things. Is someone already using the station, or is it out of service, or is it otherwise available? How fast can it charge the car? And then how much will it cost per kilowatt hour or for time parked there, et cetera? There are different ways that the billing works. It would require the Secretary of Transportation to adopt rules to implement the provisions of the section, including requirements for the type of data to be provided, provisions to ensure that the data is accurate and reflects real-time conditions, and definitions of what it means to be available and what real-time is. So for example, real-time may not mean up to the second. It could mean updating the network every 5 or 10 minutes, something like that. Requirements that the data include geographic information so that you could plug it into something like Google Maps or Yahoo Maps or another GPS software to navigate to it. Requirements that it comply with industry best practices and standards, including those NEVI standards, the sort of national standard, and then provisions permitting charging station operators to attach reasonable conditions to data use to protect any confidential business information, provided that those conditions wouldn't prevent this data from being used by the third-party software developer that creates the sort of charging network map that's generally available. So that is the real-time charger information. Should I keep going, or do you want to pause there to?
There's questions.
Representative Webb?
So will this information be available on PlugShare or on any type of, like, if it's a charge point, it should be available on ChargePoint, but I guess it could also be available on PlugShare. So just like, what's the mechanism for?
Right. So for committee members or folks listening who aren't familiar, PlugShare is one of the third-party software developers that creates an app that you can have on your phone that pulls down from multiple different charging networks, including, for example, off-network providers like a dealership that may have its own chargers with a function where you can pay, and but it'll integrate from like ChargePoint and Blink and Flow and Electrify America and all these different providers, and provides data on the price, the availability, and the speed of different chargers. There are other ones too, like a better route planner and other apps that are out there. So yes, that would be a third party software developer.
Okay, because I think this is a very valid idea. I am unsure of like the entire universe of third parties that provide this data. Like in my EV, I can go onto my nav and say, add a charge stop, and some chargers come up. A lot of them still don't come up. They're just not on the software that's on my EV. So I find that PlugShare includes a lot of them, not always, there are just a number of different third parties. I'm not sure which one is better than the others, but I don't have a sense of the universe of those. I don't know whether you do, and whether this legislation would require that this information is shared with all of them or some of them.
What it requires is that the information is made available to third parties. With respect to the third parties themselves, it's up to them whether they integrate it and how they do that. And I certainly don't know the entire universe of third-party providers. I mentioned a couple of the ones that I'm familiar with, but there could be any number of them out there. And I imagine there are new apps being developed by folks who have an idea for a different approach.
So that's
And this makes this just makes it generally available to third parties so that if they wish to, and if they design their app in a way that it can do it, it could scrape this data and put it out there for folks who use their app. And I know some manufacturers would also likely be considered third parties where they're now developing their own apps to identify chargers that work with their car or the car that the EV owner is driving. So
Yeah, I mean, it's the Wild West out there, as we know. So this isn't picking who the third apps, parties might be, but and for the most part, for public chargers, it's to their advantage, and it's why most of them do provide this data out there. It really is to ensure they're all out there. So there are, I think, 3 states now that have this requirement in. A couple of things to consider, would be a start date from chargers from this point on, need to do that. But yeah, that's the idea, and we can bring in some testimony that there's some really solid data that says that range or anxiety that people have, and they're worried about, how to do this rather than become an expert on, like we've all become, to have a third-party app like PlugShare, to be able to pull up where all the charges are, that they're online, they're working, and what the price is, so that you can make decisions going forward.
any other questions?
Step one, on page 4,
Mhm.
and then number 4.
Yeah.
Requirements of the data provided pursuant to subsection A of this section include geographic information sufficient to support third-party mapping software. So, you mean where the EVSE is located, that
Right.
geographic information?
Yeah.
Okay, and will this require being in an area that actually you have service in? Or does it matter? I don't know. I mean, that's just.
Yes, it's a good question. there potentially could be some public chargers out there that
We're in a rural area.
potentially that aren't online, but I don't know of any that, because they have to monitor their charger, they can't send a worker there, so it's possible there might be one that's not, connected. But I wouldn't know of one, because again, they can't run their charger without being able to control in some manner.
So this isn't me trying to find the charger. It is me trying.
Yes. So that, this just says this is where the charger is located, in the same way you can find a coffee shop. If you're in a strange town.
I guess I'm gonna harken back to several weeks ago, Representative White mentioned something about being at some charging station and you had difficulties. Was the reason because you couldn't? Something happened. That's what.
I think I was
Does this
referring
solve
to-
this or?
I'm sorry.
No,
Can I answer that?
oh, I don't know. And I question.
Answer it to Damien.
I'm not the chair.
When Representative White next raises her hand, maybe she could answer that question.
There's some background information that you might like to share with us, Representative White.
Yes, when I was recalling when I used, I think it was the Bradford Nevi charging station this past summer. And one of the issues I had with it was that it was a bright sunny day. There was no shade around the chargers, and you had to be able to scan a QR code to get directions on how to I can't remember if it was I had to download software, but so the brightness was one issue. The other issue was very weak service. Yeah, so those two issues both contributed to a less than successful experience.
So this language here doesn't get to issues of cell coverage near the chargers or issues of how user-friendly the particular charger is. What it gets to is it allows the third-party software developers to basically drop a pin or have a link that you can click on that drops a pin on Google Maps or whatever mapping software you use.
Okay.
So then your car can navigate to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
that's
Okay.
that's what this does. It doesn't address issues like that, which are sort of a variety of user friendliness
Okay.
problems.
Thank you.
Okay, so the second section here would create a current EV charger regulation working group. The groups would be, oh, I'm so sorry. Trying really hard not to have to get that reminder. Okay, so it creates the EV charger regulation working group, which would analyze the current requirements and recommend changes to laws and rules in Vermont that would eliminate duplicative provisions, address regulatory gaps, and increase the number of EV chargers in Vermont. So before going further, right now, the regulation of EV chargers is found both under the public service statutes, as well as Title 19, the highway statutes, and they don't necessarily completely jive with each other. And then you also have the Agency of Agriculture, who does weights and measures, who checks them to make sure they're actually, similar to a gas pump where you want to make sure that when it says it pumped a gallon, it actually pumped a gallon. With the chargers, they're making sure that it's actually giving a kilowatt hour or kilowatt of electricity when it says it is, et cetera. So you have regulations in multiple places. So this would have the working group consist of the Secretary of Transportation or designee, Secretary of Agriculture or designee, Commissioner of Taxes or designee, chair of the Public Utility Commission or designee, secretary of commerce and community development or designee, and then a representative of the Public Power Supply Authority. So they're sort of a trade group that represents our public utilities. The working group would be charged with identifying and analyzing the current legal requirements, including requirements with respect to chargers that are available to the general public around parking charges, time restrictions, applicability of Vermont taxes, requirements for signage, requirements for user assistance contact information, requirements related to disclosing charges that are applicable, display of information relating to inspection and certification, permissible formats for payment, forms of payment, availability of information related to charger status and usage, and other requirements related to like location and accessibility. So that's for public chargers. And then with respect to chargers that are available to a specific subset of the public, such as to tenants or guests at an apartment building or tenants and guests of a business, or I'm sorry, customers of a business, requirements applicable to the chargers where the owner charges for the use of the charger, and requirements applicable to charges for which no payment is required. So some businesses offer it as a sort of encouragement for customers. And then with respect to private home and business chargers, any existing legal requirements related to installation, use, and disclosure of data. And then any other legal requirements related to the use of standard electrical receptacles for charging electric vehicles. So this gets away from the traditional sort of charger that you might think of and gets down to a 120 volt or 240 volt outlet, which you might find at, for example, a campground or something like that. And they have some out here on Aiken Avenue for chargers, or for electric vehicles. It would also charge them with identifying and summarizing the available information that are available to the public, electricians, and other persons who install electric vehicle chargers, determine if there are any legal or regulatory barriers in Vermont to the adoption and increased availability of the chargers, identify any gaps in the existing laws, and any potential legislative or regulatory action to address those gaps, identify instances in which Vermont has overlapping or conflicting laws or rules, and identify necessary action to eliminate those instances, and then also examine the impact of peak electricity rates on the availability of electric vehicle chargers, and whether there might be potential legislative or regulatory actions that could mitigate any negative impacts identified. And they would have the administrative, technical, and legal assistance of agencies of transportation, agriculture, and the Public Utility Commission. And they would be charged with reporting back by December 15th. As far as meetings, the Secretary of Transportation would call the first meeting on or before September 15th. And then they would select their own chair and cease to exist on December 31st. Since they're all state employees except for the one private group, there's no compensation, additional compensation provided in here. So that is that.
So just sort of a summary is, as we've had testimony here, there's a lot of moving pieces and really nobody knows all the rules associated with it. So public charging, we're starting to get a good handle on it. But then again, if you have a condo association and they want to put in some chargers for the people who live there, what are the requirements if they don't charge people to use it? And what are the requirements if a visitor comes and they want to charge for it? I think, became clear when writing grants, at least from my understanding, ACCD, is that as they approach places like that, it's not clear what the rules are. So this is really just, what are the rules? And, where are they? What are they? And hopefully this group will come to agreement that, yes, those are the rules. And they ideally will identify, here are places where the rules are unclear. They're not complementary. They're going against each other, or here's some clarification to the rules. Because we want people to feel comfortable putting these in. And if they have to charge sales tax, they need to know that up front. And this peak charging piece, we're finding out that there are some utilities, particularly small ones, that have peak charging during the daytime. And that would prevent anybody from putting in a fast charger because the costs would be so expensive. And I think there's a car dealer in Swanton who put in a couple of fast chargers, then got hit with the peak charges and said, we can't afford this. And they took them offline. So I think that's maybe a much longer term issue, but those small utilities that have very high peak charges, those areas of the state are not going to get any fast chargers because of it right now. So that's really to understand what's going there. And I think there's a knowledge that that problem exists. But at this point, nobody's really going after it. Is it something that we can work with?
Representative what?
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. So I appreciate this, bill. Couple questions. Applicability of Vermont taxes. We had a brief conversation in here in committee a couple weeks ago regarding, electric vehicle charging. We learned that some chargers are adding a 6% sales tax. And I think we questioned whether is sales tax the appropriate way to tax, or should it be a different tax or similar to the gas tax and coming into the transportation fund? So I guess I'm questioning, do you want to be any more explicit about that, that section of applicability of Vermont taxes? I'm also asking her Rep McCoy's memory of my challenging charging experience this past summer. Anything about, would you want to add anything in here about ensuring that use of public chargers is clear and successful? I mean, because if you need good, a good connection and you can't get that, so that just causes problems when people are trying to charge. So wondering if there's any language about usability for the customer that you'd want to consider adding to this.
Well, I don't get to consider adding or subtracting language from it. That's up to all of you. There is the language about whether there are any requirements related to the availability of information, the location and accessibility, availability of contact information for user assistance. Certainly you could tweak that language, but that would really be a call for all of you if you decide to move forward with this. And it is really asking them to kind of say what are the various requirements, and the answer may be there are no requirements around, whether you do provide a contact phone number. It's just, you need to get, and I don't know the answer about what all the requirements are on this, but that's really what this is asking. You can always tweak that language if you decide to move forward with this.
Yeah, I think, the testimony from Weights and Measures says, hey, they're, based on what's required for, say, gas pumps and what's in state statute right now, when he goes to look at them, not only is he measuring the right electricity, but he's looking at the signage and all of that. And you can see, he showed us all the websites he's going to try to figure it out what's going. So there'll be a piece of that, minimally it's got to be working. It's got to, you got to be able to read the thing. That may not help your sunlit problem. I think that part of that is already in here. But what are the specific requirements for a public charger? And I, also throw out there, how do you define a public charger? If a condo association doesn't charge for using it, is it a public charger or is it a private charger? And what are the requirements? Do they have to collect sales? Do they have to collect sales tax on that or not? And I'm not sure anybody really knows for sure, or it could be it's clear at this point. So those are the kind of questions we're just trying to determine. Once we determine it, I think, this committee has said, hey, I think public charging sales tax is like a gas tax and should go to the transportation fund. And certainly, as right now, as cars electrified and they aren't providing the 30% gas tax sales from out of state that we presently get, they're going to be going to these chargers. So we're going to want to, and they'll be subject to sales tax. We probably would want to steer that toward transportation fund.
Representative Keating?
So on that, building on that, Representative Couch, is there anything in that bill that requires them to look at the infrastructure of the way that the charging companies reimburse or pay their taxes? Because it comes right through, it probably, that's the question. In other words, where's the sales tax? Because you can't charge sales tax. And if you charge sales tax on sales on a system that's already been taxed, that's a slippery slope. But so it would be the backside where you'd be getting your sales tax, not on the charging side.
So we already have existing laws about when the sales tax is charged and when it's not. So I think part of what this would be looking at is when does it apply to the charger? So, and what taxes apply? So you do have different scenarios where in some cases it's the electric utility that has the charger and they are selling the electricity right through the charger. In other cases, it's someone who's paying the electric utility for that electricity. And so you do have
So that would be
different
part of this
scenarios.
bill to be able to.
It would be part of
understand
sort of
that.
explaining why you may see different charges in different places and also identifying, does that make sense? So yeah, I think that's one of the pieces here, and I can't answer, I'm not a tax expert, but you do have sort of different steps in the electricity transmission picture there, where in some cases it's Stow Electric or GMP who operates the charger. In other cases, it's it's the state of Vermont. It's the local store. It's a gas station that contracted with the network to put some chargers in to get people to come to the convenience store. So
Representative Flynn?
So, Damien, you mentioned that some of this bill is AOT, some of it may be public service statute, some may be the Agency of Agriculture. So will this bill need to be vetted by the Committee on Energy and Infrastructure? Will it need to be vetted by the Agency of Agriculture, possibly Commerce, because it's going to be a commerce thing too, I think. So I don't know if all of this is within our purview.
Ultimately, the question of who it needs to go in front of is a question for the chamber. And in consultation with the House clerk. And the House has rules about when things fall into different committees' jurisdiction. I can't answer for sure. It does have implications for energy infrastructure. I'm not sure which committee oversees weights and measures. So yeah, and there are potential tax implications. That said, it's also a study, so it's not requiring legislation. So I don't know if it would need to make a formal stop, or whether it's the sort of thing where they could do a drive-by. But yeah, these are questions I can't give you a firm answer on.
You want to go after?
Yeah, I would say it's a really good question, but I mean, we're not changing anything. We're not making any policy decisions. It's really what's required now. And at this point, like I already said, we've only discovered a few of these things by, sort of looking around and finding out some of the rules that we didn't, or myself didn't even understand. So it's really just to get information. And then from there, decide whether there's appropriate, if there's holes that we want to fix or policy decisions to make to encourage more successful public charging.
I think that, well, I don't respond. I think that the testimony that we've heard and the significant amount of work that's been done here, to me, outlines the problem pretty well and outlines a lot of challenges, but also identifies how many different layers it hits. So one of the things that I've been doing is, well, we met with the speaker. We also have a planned discussion with Chair James and have highlighted sort of the issue, but we hadn't gotten quite to the length. But this, what I guess I'm saying, a lot of great work, a lot of clearly on what are the problems and the challenges. And when we dug into it the level that we did, it was clear that there's more questions than answers. We aren't the committee that deals with charging, landlord, tenant, et cetera, but that doesn't stop the part where it's a legit questions and some work that needs to be done by some piece. And although I don't think I could say that I want the Secretary of Transportation to run this. I've been trying to encourage Representative Pouch that really outlining the problem and figuring out that this is something that we can move forward is, where I'm sort of at that spot. So I think that figuring out what we can do with it, I just know that PUC, ag, this digital infrastructure, they're outside of our area, but I think we, by the work the committee did, and then by the extra work that Representative Pouch has done, shows some areas that are worth. So trying to figure out what we do with it. And I'm not sure that I could say that we could support to put it into the T-bill right now, but I think I'm willing to put more committee time to it and finding some place for this thing to grab a home. Representative Lally had your hand up. I don't know.
No,
The agency may or may not want to accommodate. I don't want to put them in a spot that they have to. Representative White, if you had your hand up, you could certainly go.
I did. Well, I guess my one question was, if it doesn't go to the T-bill, where would it go?
Well, I feel like it should go into digital infrastructure, and that I would like to get Chair James to take it up because they deal with energy. It's not talking energy and digital infrastructure, but I'm not certain of that.
Yeah.
Our conversations right now, they're like I'm not sure. And of course, everybody's saying my calendar's full until
Yeah.
crossover. But they didn't say that it wasn't a worthwhile.
Yeah,
gig.
well, there's a will, there's a way. Typically, obviously crossover, we're gonna be getting a lot of bills from the Senate. Hopefully, we can find I think that's what Chair was saying, hopefully we can find a match. You know,
I don't know if the DMV bill would work for us, so I don't want to hold
Yeah.
out hope that that doesn't,
Yeah.
that doesn't seem to have that kind of piece, but I think there's work here worth doing.
Yeah, I'll. So,
I guess so are we thinking we would put this policy piece in our T-bill, just the study, is that what we're thinking? Or the DMV bill or
I'm
something?
very reluctant to put it into the T-bill,
Okay,
but because it is way beyond our normal, or I consider it beyond our normal activity and obligating our Secretary of Transportation to try to obligate and work with these other,
right,
without even hearing all the rest of the testimony and what our situation is, but I'm trying to say I don't want to let it go either.
you're trying to figure out a path forward for it
Yes.
that doesn't encumber the agency, right? Yeah, because
In
it's.
an area
it's
that's not their
a responsibility,
expertise.
yeah. Okay, all right, thanks, I was just trying to figure out what the path forward might be.
Yeah, and you know, who has responsibility is a great question. We have a bill there, I think, from Rep. Campbell, talking about making chargers more visible and also requiring that they take credit card payment. That's what the bill was. And the speaker put it here, it's a transportation. So, and he's from the, you know, energy and infrastructure. So I think it's hard to say
Is
exactly
that a
where it
commerce
goes.
thing? I mean,
Yeah, but you know, I mean, somebody's got to grab it and run with it, I think. Otherwise, and that's probably why there's so much confusion already
Right,
around these things, is because it's touching a little bit of everything.
so, I just, that seems like, not that we get to make this decision, but that the commerce angle seems to make maybe intuitive, good sense, right, at where we are now. Because there's a lot at stake in terms of, well, just many things that all kind of have a bottom line, you know, thread in common. So maybe that would be, if perhaps, you know, asking to have it, let's, you know, relieved, our committee relieved of this bill and sent to, I don't know, Commerce or something like that.
Well, it's not a bill.
Well, it
Was
was
it-
part
It was
of,
part of.
this is a
Yeah.
potential amendment. I asked this to be done as a potential amendment
Can
to the
we
T-bill.
amend a bill that's on our wall and then send it, like put your thing on Scott's bill and then send it? I don't know.
It would have to go on the floor. Yeah, we could vote it out and it goes on the floor and then I think.
Could put it in consider short form as
Usually
well.
when you're,
Sorry.
Representative McCollum?
usually when you want to relieve yourself of a bill and send it to another committee, it doesn't hit the floor.
Okay, yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
But you could,
Representative Mahaly stand up and say, yeah, the House.
It is a vote and there is an opportunity to,
And then we vote on whether it moves to the other committee.
no, but what Representative Wiley was saying is that she would want it amended first and then send it over.
Oh,
If we just took something off the wall, it would be that big.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's just to kind of like
Yeah,
no, it,
get it
Yeah.
along.
the whole thing.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Damien, what was your hard stop time?
2:45.
Okay, we have the committee discussion on the agenda for right after this next section. I'm gonna ask if there's any more specifically on this language. Some question, anybody can have a last question on that. We're gonna go to the transportation alternatives language that Damien had worked on about the changes we made regarding to the water, to trying to get remember, this is about getting the federal funds out the door into as many projects as quickly as possible. But we want to move to that while he's here. We have committee discussion time available after that before floor if we want to pick back up on this conversation, but I want to follow what we have to have our ledge council for and what his availability is, and then we can go back into, because we weren't technically in discussion, and when I start allowing that back and forth, it's all fine when it's not a controversial item, but it's not the way we do it. So I correct myself. Can we move to you have received an email copy of the updated language.
Yeah.
And we had asked them to make changes, so we're moving off of that piece of proposed language. We're going back to the old piece of proposed language that we asked you to work on yesterday. And
So,
while we've got you, we'll go from there and we'll go back to community discussion if need be, or when we can. Does discussion.
Pulling up the document here, and it does seem like we worked on this about a week ago, though, according to the timestamp, it was yesterday.
So what is the time stamp?
It's, oh, no, it's 3:10, so that's 2 days ago. That said, it says version 2 at the bottom. I forgot to update the timestamp when I revised it, but it'll say there'll be a V2 on the little document number at the bottom. So this language, I ran it by the Agency of Transportation after we met the other day, and I've made the changes. So what this does here, the first change in subsection C on page 1, line 13, changes the after this fiscal year, this coming fiscal year, it changes the maximum grant to $600,000. So that's up from 300,000. In subsection, there we go, F1 at the bottom of the page, this takes away the 50% dedication to water quality projects and allows the grant funds to be awarded for any eligible activity with no set aside. And it applies to fiscal year 2027 and thereafter. And then on the second page, the next section, this amends the session law that created a temporarily higher grant allocation amount. So through the current fiscal year, it leaves that at $600,000. For the coming fiscal year, starting July 1, it increases the maximum grant to $1.2 million for one fiscal year. And then after that, it'll revert to $600,000 if you don't extend it. So I think.
Got a question?
Yeah, I have a question.
Please go ahead.
I thought we were gonna sort of try to like give a couple of examples, the chair sort of wanted salt sheds in there. That got crossed out. I know we had to cross out the 50%, but we sort of wanted to make reference to that, maybe reference to another one or two groups that are eligible for the.
I apologize. I thought that the committee had decided not to do the
Not
examples.
to do like the whole exhaustive list, but possibly do one or two because we were gonna leave the chair one, so. It's in there, right?
Yes, I am not keen on, I am trying to be very clear. We are but obviously it's not easy to be that way. I believe we are trying to get as much, not to lose the federal money, get the federal money out as quickly as possible and increase the flexibility to the agency, but by no means reducing our commitment to water quality projects being available to this program. And if there was, I thought there was language that would leave the water quality and salt shed, but without referencing the 50%. So I was just trying to find my language and I must have done it. Maybe I didn't have it previously. It was from the presentation. Or maybe it was just on the board. I started the language part and I appreciate what you're saying. That's exactly where I'm at.
But he just have to reword it, but that's what we got undone, but referencing one, like some one or two.
I didn't want to, I do not want to take out I do not want to take out the references to salt sheds, but I do want to take out the references to 50% and make it, so represent pouch.
Yeah, so, maybe we need to put that back in because it says reserved for municipalities for environmental mitigation. We could say, these funds are for, and we could talk about the transportation stuff, one sentence, this kind of stuff, such as, and then environmental mitigation projects, relating to stormwater highways, including those. And having that in there.
Yeah, no, that's
Leave that
exactly.
in, and it also just sort of says, hey, the other part of it, those are all.
Not limited to, but here are a couple
Yeah.
examples.
David, I'm sorry, I did not comment back when you had asked me to. You definitely put in the more hours than I did in reviewing it. I didn't do it. I forwarded it back on. And I think I was a bit unclear, but apologize, I can't put my fingers on the language that I thought that I had had before, where we were leaving salt sheds and adding those. Just, there are 8 or 10 other criteria.
Yeah.
We were just gonna point to, we were gonna do.
Yep. In just a second here.
I have a copy of the language we wrote on it. Maybe we can,
No, I think that, well, actually, I don't know, I it was online.
yeah, I must have
So,
filed it the way that, I was working off of this, I think. I know I was working off of this, because we pointed to this a number of times.
Yeah.
I feel like I, would put it in the to-go section, I found out, seeing it here. I don't know.
Back of the napkin.
Put on the back of the napkin and it didn't survive.
And they're done.
if you give me a second here. I think the question is just which projects do you want to call out?
My personal preference would be salt sheds and I think I'm forgetting the terminology.
Safe routes to schools,
Yeah.
preservation of historic transportation facilities, recreational trails, these are all eligible uses. So there's,
We don't want to list them all, we just
Just
list a couple.
yeah,
I forget the category. I don't have that paper.
What did you just say, wastewater or something?
yeah, so the,
Salt sheds and the stormwater
yeah,
and the safe routes to school infrastructure are all examples of the many projects.
Yeah.
Eligible. Not sure exactly how that wording works, but I'm just not gathering, like, I must have been working off that section. Not off of.
It could just talk about, two main categories, and projects and systems that provide safe right routes for non-drivers. And then the stormwater, that sentence there that was in. Could be as simple as that.
Yep. Okay. No, this is what I was working off of, yeah. I must not, I didn't actually work off the language.
right. Is infrastructure. There,
No,
that's fine. Give me just a second here, I'll pull up the language.
Fine.
2 and 3.
Molly, indicated to me she would not be available this afternoon, but she wants to text, she did, but she texted me and said that she needs to rest and she
Oh,
wasn't
okay.
doing so well.
Okay, activity. Moving. Is. Such as. Some check injections. Okay, let me pull up the language that I've added. Okay, so this would say grant program funds shall be awarded for any eligible activity, including environmental project mitigation projects relating to stormwater and highways, such as eligible salt and sand jet projects and safe routes to schools infrastructure. So that, and then, any eligible activity, the list is longer. Like Representative Pouch mentioned, it includes all sort of non-vehicular transportation, it includes recreational trails, et cetera. And I just had to move that down because of the way the sentence is structured. That used to be part of the 50% language. Does that work? If it does, I can send it back for editing and include it in the T-bill draft, or if that's the committee's pleasure.
I gotta let myself get a little distracted on scheduling a few other things. So grant funding shall be awarded for any eligible activity, including environmental mitigation projects related to stormwater and highways such as eligible salt and sand shed projects and safe routes to school infrastructure in accordance with the priorities established in subdivision 2 of this section. Okay. Yes, Representative.
What did you say, Phil, about non-vehicular? What did you?
That came right out of
That's it.
the presentation that said, projects and systems that will provide safe routes for non-drivers.
Infrastructure. I mean, I'd rather have that because I think.
Oh, yeah, construction, it could say construction, planning, and designing of infrastructure-related projects and systems that will provide safe routes for non-drivers. Because
I
that,
mean, I think that one's better than safe routes to school, because that's
Yeah.
more encompassing
Yeah,
than.
because it is the infrastructure they're trying to solve with
It's
this.
a mouthful.
Yeah.
Or point the specific up on the top, I think, other page.
Oh, yeah.
There you go.
I think it's a second bullet.
All right.
The
So
the rest of the committee was.
salt and sand shed projects wouldn't be eligible.
They would be eligible.
I know, but we have eligible salt and sand.
I'm not
Are they
sure.
all eligible?
Oh,
I don't know.
So eligible salt and sand shed projects was in the underlying law, and I
Okay.
don't administer the grants, so I'm not
Okay.
sure what wouldn't be eligible.
Well, I guess they're all now, they gotta be eligible because of the, correct me if I'm wrong, David, they're the closest to the water.
That's right.
So it's the distance out, so they don't know.
I think that infrastructure, this one, is more encompassing than safety. It's good.
Yeah.
The 1.2 was that, where that? The 600,000 and the 1.2 is corrected in here. Programs in the state fiscal year shall not exceed.
You want to use the non-drivers language from the handout?
We're in there, huh? Doesn't matter.
I'm sorry.
Safe routes for non-drivers, that's what they're,
Yeah.
uh,
Is that okay with everyone? That's what's in the handout, so.
I'd add, this is. Trying to speak to Representative Burke, that's actually not here.
Yeah, yeah,
And this, as it goes on to say, including children, older adults, individuals with disabilities, et cetera.
A
So,
lot deeper than I'm trying to get.
yeah. So, but non-drivers would include the,
Bike ped, yeah.
yep,
I guess this would be one of these cases where the people that administer the project were here, they know what we want. We're giving them more flexibility. And
This
we're not,
doesn't tie their hands at all.
No.
The program, the
Yeah.
requirements are all written down.
Yep.
This is just sort of like what the Senate's gotten done in the past, where they take projects out and put them in the front to highlight them. We just want to highlight what's underneath.
we're highlighting it. So,
Yeah.
thank you for that preview of my work in the next month.
Yeah. We're ready. Yeah.
That starts as soon as this gets across.
Does the money part get identified correctly? Is the effective date's correct and the money part correct? I guess it's the question.
Yeah. those
And
are-
are we going back to the other 600,000 after next year? Is that set up the way you wanted that set up?
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this will all take effect on July 1, which will, and that'll modify this prior law here, which set the max cap, the maximum grant allocation for the coming fiscal year. So if that takes effect on July 1, they can go ahead and issue $1.2 million grants, or grants up to 1.2 next during the coming fiscal year.
I didn't put this piece as, let's send it back to editing, send it back to piece. Send it back out to the committee tomorrow morning, 8:45, where markup is on the schedule. This potentially to move into the T-bill. With anything else that anybody's looking to still potentially. We're gonna start at 8:45 and make sure that we can be where we're at. I don't anticipate, from what I gather, that we're gonna get back here in committee tomorrow afternoon from the, it would be. The floor could go on, from what I gather, in quite some time. If there is available time after lunch, we're gonna take up mileage-based user fee again. If there's not, we're gonna do the floor and be done for the weekend. But we're gonna start at 8:45 to mark up where we're at and make sure the committee's where it is for any additional work and whatever. I have another meeting on the T-bill date. I just got another request. I'm not sure if I didn't feel like that was entirely clear yet exactly when we are filling it out. You'll see in next week's schedule that Tuesday we have testimony on the local option tax and on the federal rail banking, and another time to mark up. So we'll be looking to potentially vote on this on Wednesday at the last of the conversation. So those are the steps, and that's where we're at. You're gonna send us the final version of this so that we could potentially put it in tomorrow morning?
I'm gonna send it out for editing and ask to get it back, hopefully by the end of the day, so I can.
Yeah. With that, we can go back to the conversation. We'll go back to the presentation, but we can all call it now a committee discussion where we can discuss back, where you can ask your questions back and forth across, where we broke the rules earlier, and we want to have those rules. I may want, back to talking about the Representative Pouch's potential or his language. If, Damon, you feel like you have what you need.
I do.
You even have a few extra minutes that you didn't expect.
That is great. I appreciate it.
We will see you tomorrow morning at 8:45.
See you in the morning.
For this and updates on mileage-based language for us to we'll look at. It doesn't mean we'll be able to action on it. And then we'll see what happens after floor, after lunch. Yep, thank you. Hopefully that's clear as mud to everybody, and let's go back to where we were talking about. I could put our, guests in the room on, I think I may have already spoke to it. Normally after we hear on language, the first thing we'll do is ask the agency for, comment on language. Whether they want to or not, I don't want to make you, and we didn't do that. And that would be part of the sort of the next steps.
So I did share this with.
Yeah, so what you just tell me where we are, what are we discussing?
Oh, we're going back to where we were with the EV charging language. And we're in committee discussion piece, so we can go back and forth across. And we can kind of pick up with where we are at, which was, to my mind, figuring out what we might or might not be able to do. Normally we get to this spot, we have language, we've heard it. The first thing we usually do is go to the agency for their feedback, and then we go to witnesses. But I am still saying, this is out of our jurisdiction, but that doesn't mean that I still think there's value. So we've got to figure something out. Or I'd like to figure something out. You were going to say something, and then.
No, I was saying, I shared it with Patrick, and I shared it with ACCD and weights and measures, sort of, with the expectation, to get testimony on it.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
We'd like to.
Sure. For the record, Michelle Bonepower, Agency of Transportation. I appreciate the deliberations on this because it is a very complex piece of work that needs to be accomplished in some manner that is very cross-cutting. And I think at this point, as has been recognized, it's a bit sort of far afield from the agency's main mission to address most all of the elements that are in this. I mean, we certainly are tasked with building the infrastructure and making sure we set guidelines that address the issues that you've identified here. But then when you get into sort of the taxing policy and some of the elements related to the, sort of energy elements that the Public Service Department covers and weights and measures and everything else. It gets a bit more complicated, and I think that perhaps one way to think about this would be to perhaps set up a meeting, Representative Couch, with you and some of the key folks like Patrick and Bronwyn, and make sure we get everybody sort of at the table and talk about, are there any things here that any of the groups are already working on that they could sort of be perhaps coming back with legislative recommendations for next year, and then what are the parts that are not being worked on, and then who is the responsible party, and then what's needed to engage them to work on something, and would there be money needed to advance those things. So I think having the comprehensive list is super important. We've made a lot of progress in that regard in terms of what you've outlined. Many of these things are not new. We've looked at them in prior years. So I guess that would be the agency's feedback for you at this point.
And so that's on the sort of the second part of this. The first part was, I guess, probably the same answer on, availability or transparency for public chargers, particularly fast chargers. That would, you'd say, sort of say the same thing, yeah.
I would, I think Representative McCoy did sort of mention the commerce angle of things too. And, it's like, there's I think we're also like in this very sort of trying to do apples to apples between EV charging and gas stations. And, are we going to have the big banners, on poles about the price of gas for EV charging or not? There's so many things that I think we haven't, and also because everything is becoming more digital, a lot of people probably don't even pay attention to the signs on gas stations now because they have Gas Buddy. That's what they look at. So it's, what is the best approach for the future as this type of infrastructure advances? And I think once again, that's a little bit outside of our venue.
Which, thank you very much, which puts us sort of where we were sort of headed to saying, how do we bring up, I find this is a legislative, administrative struggle. I feel like it's gonna be one of the second times where I feel like we're doing something and I don't know how we break through on, I shouldn't brought up that, but I feel like we're stuck.
Yeah, well, I think the suggestion from Michelle is a good one in that I've already been communicating with these folks and, I can see if in the next, week I can get some people at the table and just sort of say, how do we move this forward or what's already happened? But, I don't think those different groups are they're gonna do their pocket of stuff and that's it. Weights and measures, and I don't blame them. They're gonna do what's required by the existing law. And, that's gonna leave other things just sort of floating there. So somehow we gotta, I think it's probably a legislature that's gotta pull it together. But how that happens, I'm not sure. It's not the first time I think we run into different committees, who's responsible, and then the ball sort of never gets carried across the finish line.
Yeah, I mean, I think our best bet is to see what bills come over from the Senate. And then depending on what one links up, we can have
There
a
might be
conversation.
something we could, yeah.
Well, we can have a conversation with the chair and say, hey, this is what we want to work on. Are you willing to, work with me? And it just gives us more time, but I would bet that there's probably something coming over from the Senate that would
Yeah.
find some relevance.
It's germane to that,
Germane, to it, yeah.
Okay.
We put an amendment onto that bill, is that what you're doing? Or rework that?
Well, when it comes to the committee, we'll just sit down with the committee and say, hey, even can we do a drive-by or, get bills submitted to us or,
After this week, that
Yeah.
would be going to sit with Chair James and say, what do you think about this? I think. Let's go ahead.
I do think that this bill is somewhat indicative of how state government operates, where agencies are really good at their lane, but often they're not talking to each other because they are focused on what is in their purview. And so I think it's important to have bills like this that really require multiple agencies to look at existing policies from like the customer perspective, like how is this ultimately affecting the customer? And so I think it's really important to be bringing those agencies together. And yeah, so that's just kind of my show of support for trying to move this forward.
Representative Cook?
Yeah, and to that point, I remember when we first started talking about EV charging stations and we started talking about pricing and what it should be, and then all of a sudden somebody told us, well, that's not within your purview. So I'm thinking, oh, it's gonna be the energy committee. They come out with agriculture, we're like, agriculture, how could they possibly be in charge of energy?
Yeah.
But they are, because, oh, it's a waste of another thing, and they go, okay. Yeah, you never know.
Sound like something.
Yeah.
I mean, transportation in itself falls into, well, you got transportation, fixed roads, but there's some healthcare pieces to it. I mean, there's economic development piece to it. So, every community touches some, but there are some topics like this one that is like really spread out and needs to be sort of brought in.
No, I agree with that. And I think we could probably find a dance partner. There's no doubt. I'd say it like that, yeah. I think you can.
That is spoken
I mean,
like
I think-
somebody who's been here for a while. Like the rest. I'm sitting here going, how does that work? But I've never done that. So he's like this, I read it like this is something we can do. We've done it before, but a lot of us, I'm sitting here going, I'm not sure how that works. Find it, what do you say? If there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that what you said? I think earlier?
It's have to be made into a priority. Yeah.
So scheduling wise, I don't want to shut down the conversation.
No,
If
that's
there is
okay.
any.
That's
If
good.
there- Scheduling wise, now we sit here at 2:30 and Damien's not available. Patrick and Damien both are not available at bigger chunks tomorrow. The MBUF is still the priority of pushing it through. He's got to work on the language and the request that we made today. And he had to work on changes of the request that we made yesterday. The queuing up the local options tax, Logan was in here for a little while. He's working with, already forgot his name, that is in the JFO that's coming in on Tuesday. So now we're hurting for time, but now we have time. And we don't have
That's how it
any,
works.
we don't have witnesses.
Yeah.
So that is sometimes happens, and mostly because the deadline is up in the air a little bit. Yeah, Representative Coy and then Representative.
I just, because I had to leave the room for a bit, did we take out that national, whatever, inflationary thing yet?
That's not in the language now.
It's not, in-
We took out.
I don't remember
if we removed
whatever
it.
was.
I just-
Did we actually take it out?
We didn't remove it, we
Yeah.
just, it's unresolved.
Okay.
That's
Okay, well, I
my
think it's-
That was my
I don't think
understanding.
We took it out either.
What was
I
the
think
most
we
of
need-
those?
Yeah.
Wasn't that the language that we took out?
No,
Yeah,
it's-
that
I
was
just think
the
it's-
$10 fee.
So I mean, I really, it's going, and I think that we need to take that out
Yeah.
for sure. So I don't know if we get that message to Damien before he comes back. I
I
don't
think
know.
that's
We'll have
worth
further
hearing
discussion.
comments about that. We can do that right now. We're opening committee discussion.
I mean, I think
We-
Brownie,
We need the framework around mileage-based user fee to move forward,
yes.
but we do have to make decisions on that piece. It does not have to be, in my mind, completely prescriptive because it's their job to put the pieces together in terms of what does the programming allow and what doesn't allow, and they need to be told the direction that we want to go and make it work. The escalator is a big one. That one does have to be decided, but there are, I guess, the workings versus the policy. There are some policy ones still out there. I agree, we can still talk about that, right? I don't have trouble unless we're out of order in some way to really understand what everybody's opinion on that is, and maybe we can make a.
What do we have for the schedule?
Right now, it's on committee
Oh,
discussion.
yeah, no, that's.
Because
That's
it was-
good. Yeah,
We're not, Damien's not available.
Yeah.
So
that's good.
you were gonna say something.
Yeah, I may be repeating myself, but first of all, I committed to getting mileage-based user fee. I think it's the right thing to do for a lot of reasons. But it also feels like, it's feeling a little rushed in that we're just getting the language together. And I think, the administration sort of last minute decided, okay, let's really push this. So it's sort of, I almost wonder if we shouldn't be doing the same thing and tying it to the DMV bill and, working a little more through some of these kind of questionable issues. I don't know. But while I want to do it, it feels like it feels a little rushed. And I want to make sure it's done well and makes sense. Even in the language we have now, we didn't quite have all the language in there yet because there were still some questions. So I just put that out there. I'm willing to work on it as much as we can and see if we can't get it out. But I think it's a lot to get out in just a couple days.
On that,
Yeah, no, I was just saying within that, there's still a couple options. I mean, I guess, another option, like I said, I think we really want it in the T-bill, but, we could, not include it, wait to get, wait for it to go over to Ways and Means. That's gonna buy us, maybe a couple days. We can do an amendment there, or probably buy us another 5 days or so and wait till it gets on the floor. And then somebody could offer an amendment to the T-bill, because it's gotta sync up with the T-bill along the way.
Okay.
Now, I just don't think it can go on the DMV bill, but, we probably could maybe buy some time, but, ultimately, if you're talking about extra, maybe 5 days, which is.
quite a bit if that's.
Yeah. I don't know, it depends on, predicated on the conversations.
That for some reason are different than.
Yeah, that are different, so it all depends on that too, so yeah.
Well, I appreciate that because that might give us the week that we need to feel more comfortable about it. On that same route or direction, it's not the same direction, but your feeling about whether it's, whether we don't have enough time or not, I don't know if we're say rushed or not, but the comments, the discussion that says we as a committee or we as a legislature have sort of said, we're definitely going to mileage-based user fee for everything is not something that I am sold on at all. And I fought against it and lost under the idea that it was intent language and it can always change last year in the community conference. Because I'm not sold that that's the way to go entirely for everything. I'm very likely to potentially lose that argument or not, but basing our decisions when we make comments and say, well, when we go to gas or when everybody goes to this, we haven't made that decision that we're going everybody there. So that part is something that gets to me that I does say that I feel rushed because I haven't come to that total acceptance that is the way that it should be. I don't mind reiterating it. So I don't like, I understand user pays. But I can get a more efficient vehicle to save on my gas tax. I don't want to be limited in how many miles that I go. I want as much economic activity and I don't know, go west, young man, and freedom to go everywhere. And if I can pedal the damn thing, I should be able to go as far as I want. And I don't know that that's a good argument. I'm just saying that's where I'm at with this sort of thing. I'm not on the idea that we should be at a total amount of miles, that we don't want to be limiting activity. We want to limit the impact on the environment. We want to collect the most amount of money. We want to fix the roads. But I sure don't want to slow down people from going places and doing things. And that, I just haven't come to grips on that. So I'm not saying that we've made a policy that we're going to go this way for gas, for all vehicles, but.
I mean, that was thrown in by the Senate.
Yeah, it was, and I lost.
So, yeah, so,
We both did, but it's intent language.
right, we get that, so that, and we really need to be clear on that because that we need to break one from the other. It's great that, in developing the mileage-based user fee for EVs, there was also some thought, hey, someday, this might be the direction we're going. But 30% of our gas tax is paid by out-of-state buyers of gas. And if we were to go to mileage-based user fee for everybody, that means you're not charging gas tax anymore, and you're gonna lose all that revenue from out-of-staters. If we were to go in that direction, it's a long term, it ain't gonna happen in the next couple of years. So we shouldn't get too tied up in that. The mileage base for EVs, I think makes sense, and I'm willing to work through it. Just feels like we've only really had 2 sessions going over the language, and every time, at least I have a lot of questions to make sure it makes sense and it's not a huge burden for people to meet the requirements and keep it as simple as possible. And take out the inflation factor too.
The representative.
Yeah, I feel, I appreciate Representative Couch's numerous questions on the MBUF because it's helped us kind of see how it's going to unfold. I feel like having taken out, I think we took out 2 sections of fees because I was concerned about too many fees there. And again, just remembering that this is to equalize EV drivers and gas drivers, not to penalize EV drivers. I thought Representative McCoy's suggestion about looking at the registration fee, maybe that might need a little bit more thought from the agency. The 2-year, the 1 year, when, January 1st rolls around, I don't know if they've come to a decision on whether they do limit it to, 1-year registrations while this MBUF gets off the ground, but I think, I don't think we got a resolution on that. And the inflator, I think a number of us are against that. I appreciate, I think, Rep. Tomlinson brought that up last week, but just, inflator, if there's none on the gas tax is a no-go. I'd also be willing to tie it to a gas tax inflator, whether that would be pulled out and defeated, but I feel like I'm willing to take a stand to say we've got to deal with this gas tax issue. But that's fine.
Yeah, could you let Patrick into our discussion or invite Patrick Murphy into our sorry,
You're listening, we're getting them up.
he has some, well, he's got some comments. I think it's worthwhile to hear him as we keep going. I didn't mean to, I thought you were done, right?
I am.
Yeah, I mean, not done, but I'm saying, I thought that you had finished that thought. I'd like to have him join us on some of that. I thought we sent some pretty strong messages about the need to look at revenue over all of last year, and we've come a long ways in educating the entire body. I didn't realize something in the last bit that, we have to educate the body on solving the T fund doesn't solve the town highways problem, which is what I'm really pushing, that we will be rushing a piece in potentially for that. Excellent. The escalator for gas would have kept about us a lot of these problems of where we are today, but that's the realities of where we are. Patrick, I appreciate you hearing and being out there, and this is important to us. The commitment of electric vehicle drivers be willing to pay their fair share has been steadfast and clear all the way through the process. Also understanding we're not getting the revenue from out-of-staters that use it is also an issue, but we want to make sure that it's fair, and we want to make sure that it's spot, and I think there's still a lot of work to do between now and January 1st, but I do recall you said that it was very likely that you were very confident we would get there, so thank you for coming back and keeping us going forward.
Sure. Thank you. For the record, Patrick Murphy, State Policy Director. I think I'd want to start by just sort of framing this whole discussion. You know, we've talked about what the driving rationale behind this has been, which has really been work that the agency has been doing since 2021 when it first held meetings for a road usage chart study. And that led to an implementation report that was released in 2022 and shared with the legislature, and then a number of pieces to various transportation bills that directed the agency to continue working on this and authorized the agency to seek federal funding to be able to implement this, something that now seems like it will be a rare opportunity to be able to do that. But when you just step back from the mileage-based user fee program itself and think about you know, electric vehicles and what sort of how you compare electric vehicles to gas vehicles, I think it's somewhat apt analogy that you know, you're with a gas vehicle, there's all kinds of different problems that come with it. With an electric vehicle, the rationale behind the design of this is to be able to do the same kinds of things that a gas vehicle does without the negative impacts, to be able to improve the operating system of the vehicle itself so that you're building something better for the long term. That's what we're doing or trying to do with this mileage-based user fee program. And they're not always going to be, you know, exactly analogous, because we want to continue those things that are working well with it. But we don't want to be repeating past mistakes that we see with the gas tax, which is really, you know, an ongoing declining source of funding. There's no way around that, given how vehicles have become and are becoming more fuel efficient. And so I think you even saw that in some of the language discussions that we've had, like trying to jam what is a brand new program into old language to try and create some equivalency between a gas vehicle and a electric vehicle doesn't always work out. So what worked for diesel vehicles around penalties isn't going to work for an electric vehicle. So there does need to be a kind of acceptance of doing things in new ways. And what we're trying to do with this language is to make it as specific as possible so that the committee and the legislature feels comfortable with the direction of where we're going with the program, but also, as I said, I think earlier in testimony, to remain flexible enough to implement it in a way that's going to work as we develop the actual systems to do this. So I've heard many of your concerns about the inflation adjustment factor, for example. An inflation adjustment on the gas tax is sort of building off an old system that's declining. And, you know, looking at the data, we do see that an inflation adjustment is a good policy to be able to maintain the purchasing power of transportation fund dollars. The index itself that we've recommended that was referenced in the UVM Transportation Research Center's report is used by 3 other states right now for their fuel tax. It's another state has sort of their own state version of, it's either Minnesota or Michigan, has their own state version of that. But then there are other states that have other indicators, so that's something for the committee to consider. You know, what we've talked about in response to some of the concerns that we've heard from the committee, I think it is, you know, possible to have language that you know, would make that kind of inflationary adjustment effective upon the inclusion of more vehicles into the program, so that it is done in a more coordinated fashion with the rest of the fleet that is still under paying what the average gas vehicle is paying now in fuel taxes. So when you look at, you know, you think about the mileage rate as 1.4 cents per mile, and you evaluate what range of vehicles are paying right now, we do have a very inequitable system. Households with lower incomes tend to drive less fuel efficient vehicles. That's borne out by the data. But on average, vehicles paying under the average 23 miles to the gallon are paying a much higher rate than just 1.4 cents per mile. So when you go down in efficiency, you're paying far more on a per mile basis. And then as you increase efficiency above the average, you're paying increasingly less on average per mile. And so it does leave a number of vehicles that are paying beneath what would be effectively 1.4 cents per mile. So that is a suggestion for your consideration, that if the inflation adjustment is not thrown out altogether, but that you consider a different effective date that is based on the inclusion of more vehicles above the average mileage rating, to make sure that it's coordinated with the rest of the fleet that is paying below that average. I'll pause there for discussion, but happy to answer other questions that come up.
I'm happy to leave that inflation factor in there, but rather than say once electric vehicles get to 20%, it could say this inflation factor takes effect once the same inflation factor is put on gas tax. That's the fair approach.
Or all vehicles move.
Or all, yeah.
I
But
think-
again, I'm not for adding an inflation factor just for people who are driving EVs. I think the rate of 1.4 cents is a slight compromise, because we know EVs are very efficient vehicles for the amount of electricity they use per mile in comparison to fuel-driven vehicles. So that 1.4, I think, is a pretty good compromise to be 100% fair, right down the middle. But to say that's going to go up and the rest of the fleet, the majority of it isn't, just doesn't seem fair.
Patrick, just to clarify what I heard you say, you said that Minnesota and 2 or 3 other states currently have that inflator on their gas tax, inflator tied to the construction index.
Yes, so there are several states that have some form of gas tax that's tied to inflation, but there are 4 states that specifically have it tied to highway construction index.
And-
Three of
and-
them, this very index that we've proposed, and a 4th that has its own state version of the index.
And do those states also have that inflator on their MBUF? Do they currently have an MBUF?
No, I mean, we're going to be the first state to implement a mandatory mileage-based user fee.
Okay.
So those states, many of those states just have, much higher flat fees, much higher than ours at $89.
Couple.
According to Google, 26 states plus DC have some kind of an automatic adjustment for the gas tax.
Are we listed as one of those? Because we do have
Yeah.
automatic adjustments to the gas tax, but it's not,
Yeah,
when the price is lower, the amount we collect is lower. When the price is higher, the amount we collect is higher.
there's a group of states that have it similar to aspects of ours that have it tied to the actual price. So it's based on the sale price. But there's fewer, maybe about a third that have it tied specifically to inflation.
Patrick, I agree with many of your parts, and one of them being that having an inflator is a good sound policy when it's amazing how your laws would tend to have that if you're making laws in the time of high inflation. But when you ran a 25, 30-year period with no inflation, there wasn't a lot of talk about inflators. I agree that it's a good idea, and I agree it's a good sound policy so we don't have to revisit fee increases on a regular basis because they are kind of in effect designed to keep up. Unfortunately, we have, or fortunately, or on the other side of that, we have significant issue with affordability in the state, and we have held a very strong, hard line in many cases about raising any fees. And I think this committee is right in the middle of that argument right now, right in the middle of that, squarely in the middle of that situation. I think that, and I don't right now know what the path it's going to be forward. We can't do anything about it right now in terms of other than to make sure we're clear on those that are here's position, because we're not going to take action with not everybody here, or at least without the intent to have everybody here.
Well, it's Patty.
Now that Patty's gone. So, that's sort of where
And
we're at, in the middle of a situation.
And I should say, I mean, the primary objective of the agency is to get this in place to fill the hole that we know that we have now. The idea behind the inflation adjustment is to address the holes that we know will be there in the future. But if it's the wish of the committee, then I think the agency is, fine with delaying a decision on an inflation adjustment in this particular phase.
Right.
Yeah, Patrick, I hear what you're saying about gas tax. Gas taxes are maybe paid at a higher rate by low-income Vermonters because they tend to have less fuel-efficient cars. On the other hand, I think Vermont spent, $23 or $25 million in EV incentives, which were a portion of which, I think a majority of which were directed to low-income Vermonters so that they could take advantage of these incentives to buy an EV and save money. I don't know if there's data on all cars in Vermont, what kind of cars are driven by which income level. That might be, that might inform our conversation. But, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you feel like the suggestion that putting an inflator on the MBUF as well as on the gas tax, the same inflator on the MBUF as on the gas tax, is a valid proposition?
I mean, I would say that the administration has been clear that they do not support an increase in gas taxes. And so an indexing of the gas tax would be an increase in the gas tax. There are just concerns generally that you have what is a more regressive tax that is increased and made then, more of a burden on those households. Yes, we were very intentional about making sure that the incentives that we administered were focused on those who needed it most in households with the lowest incomes. And the unfortunate reality is that funding is no longer available, and it's no longer available at the federal level as well. So, these vehicles are still out of reach for many. For those that weren't able to take advantage of the incentives and for whatever reason, and that still find themselves driving fuel inefficient vehicles, that's where the concern is, that you have inequitable system right now. Putting aside the question of fuel efficiency and the impacts to the environment, if you're trying to create a fairer system, you would get to a point where most vehicles are paying roughly the same on average on a per mile basis. And so we're pretty far from that at this point. But, directly to your question about responding to the notion of pairing this with a gas tax indexing proposal, the administration would not support that.
Representative Powell?
I agree with you, Patrick. The gas tax is a regressive tax. A mileage-based user fee is also a regressive tax. It's not a tax based on what you can afford. It's a tax based on how much you drive. And same with the gas tax. It's not a tax on how much you can afford. It's a tax on how much gasoline you buy. They're both regressive.
Yes, they're both regressive. What I'm saying is there's different degrees of regressivity. And in this case, I think right now we have a gas tax, which is actually more regressive.
So we know where the agency and the administration stands. We will have to take when we have as close to our 11 members, whether it be tomorrow morning at 8:45, where we try to mark up what we can on the bill, and perhaps we may have everybody there. We can make a decision on a couple. Sorry, before I was going to adjourn, but was there other significantly concerned? Was there another decision lined up on stuff that we were going to need to make? We decided to remove one of the penalty pieces. Our alleged counsel's coming back with additional language. We're going to go through it again. Was there any other major decisions to be made on that? Or was it more of an understanding and pieces? Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything, that
Not nearly
stood
as
out, other
controversial as
than
this.
just trying to understand, I'm trying to understand it from the average person. How's this gonna feel and look?
Right. And I appreciate that. And we need to continue to go down that path. So we'll probably take the opportunity, if we're doing markup, then we have most everybody, and we can also make some sort of a decision on this piece. Representative what?
This is not in the language for the MBUF, but I'm thinking if it does get off the ground and it launches January 1st, 27, would it make sense to request from the agency a 6-month, just like brief summary to the committee, just how it's working? Because I think it's a new program. They're trying to figure out and make it as successful as possible, but it'd be helpful to hear how it goes that first 6 months.
Well, it's going to start on January 1st, and whomever's sitting in these seats will be here January 3rd or 4th. So I absolutely agree they'll report it, but I can pretty much be sure that everybody in the committee will want to know. So we'll have them in the chair to do
Do you think it's
that.
unnecessary?
I think the topic's completely valid. I don't think we're going to need to tell them to do it, because we're all going to be, or not we, but somebody will be sitting here wanting a we'll be at real time as it's implemented. And I think we'll get that piece. Now, that doesn't mean that maybe we want some kind of, I don't know, an update that, you know, if it's September and it's not going to happen, what were to happen? I guess that is a legit. So what happens when we leave? We could get, I also think we could expect another update come May, just because the agency and the bills moved on in terms of downstairs. That doesn't mean that there's not 3 more months worth of work done before we leave in May, that we can't call them, come back in here and say, where are we at in May? And then sort of ask, what kind of update could you give us in September? I think that's legit. They can send us an email, an update of, but what if something does come up? What's going to happen in the meantime between now and then? The secretary would have the leeway to make decisions or not. What's the take on that, Patrick, in terms of coming back in here before we adjourn and giving us an update, and then some sort of update in the fall that says, here's, it's still progressing or it's not, or that's maybe some kind of email. I don't want to report. I'm not looking to put this in the bill. I'm looking at what could we expect from the agency in that area?
Yeah, no, I'm fine to be able to do that, both at the end of the session and later in the fall. And then just as part of our federal grant, we're going to be developing a final report, which we, you know, fully, I think we have language in it in the grant agreement itself that we will deliver that report to the legislature in the following year in 2028. So that is the expectation that we've had, is that we will come back the following year and be able to discuss what went well, and if there are any adjustments that need to be made, and sort of just general data about the program, and you know, how we envision the evolution of it. And then I just want to emphasize, you know, because there have been a number of questions about the details of what happens in X situation or Y situation. These have been things that we've gone through and discussed, and that we will be working through with the, you know, IT developer, where we're going through all the different potential business case issues that come up and figuring out whether there's a solution for it, and how it might be, how big of an issue it might be. And so, you know, one of the things that had come up before lunch was something around, you know, how do we make sure that we are able to pursue money in the case that a vehicle is retired early or something. There may not be an immediate solution for all of these different edge cases. There just might not be a solution, in the same way that there isn't necessarily the best possible solution for traveling out of state or between jurisdictions. But it doesn't mean necessarily that it's a huge problem. If there's, you know, the scale of it we're talking about is 13,000 vehicles at the moment, thereabouts. And that is why, one of the primary reasons why we're starting with this group of vehicles, because it's smaller, because we know for a fact that they aren't necessarily paying the equivalent fair share that other vehicles are paying. So we will be working through all of these issues, and appreciate the questions, but also the flexibility to be able to address these as they come up through the development process.
Thank you. Representative Webb.
Yeah, I just have one more question, Patrick. Last year, when we were finalizing the T-bill, I think it was in the T-bill, we made sure we put money towards the MBUF program, because at that point, the federal funding was unsure and perhaps clawed back. Did that federal funding come through, or did you end up using T-fund revenue? It was a couple $100,000. I don't remember all the details.
Yeah, no, so So there have been in two successive T-bills, funding set aside $350,000 each, which has become the state match for that federal grant. And it took a while, but we were ultimately awarded the grant, and we executed that agreement in the fall of this past year. So we are spending down on that federal grant. I think what you're referring to is that there was at one point during the legislative session last year a move to see whether there could be general fund dollars pulled into this in the event that we weren't able to access the federal funding. And so that didn't ultimately get included in the appropriations bill, and so we haven't spent anything other than what was originally authorized by you all for a state funding match to that federal grant.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, we have got to go to the floor. I appreciate the conversation. Those who just stuck it out. Everybody's got things going on with much other bigger business in the building today and yesterday and tomorrow. We will be back at 8:45 tomorrow morning. We are adjourned.